Hi, I'm Dr. Megan McNeil. I'm a clinical and forensic psychologist. Please watch the following video with caution. As usual, it contains descriptions of suicide attempt and homicide. Lindsay Clancy is currently on trial for killing her 3 children, and many people have asked me how a mother, or any parent for that matter, could kill their own child. Some of my clients are people who killed their children in a moment of extreme frustration or anger by shaking their child so violently they caused traumatic brain injury, and that led to the child's death. But in other cases, it's often related to severe mental illness, like a depression with psychotic features or some other psychotic disorder. In Lindsay Clancy's case, she's not disputing that she killed her children. For those of you unfamiliar with the facts, she strangled her 3 young children to death by tying exercise bands around their neck. She then slit her wrists and her neck and jumped from a 2-story window. She's paralyzed from the waist down and currently wheelchair-bound. Many people in Lindsay Clancy's life, including her husband, the nanny, her father-in-law, all refer to her as a wonderful mother, an excellent, devoted mother. And many people also reported her declining mental health, that she was losing weight, that she was becoming more isolated, not sleeping. Her husband testified that she told him she'd been hearing voices. So what leads an excellent, devoted mother to kill her own children? What's her motive? One theory is that she was experiencing postpartum psychosis, which affects maybe 2 in 1,000 women who have recently given birth. This is different from postpartum depression, which can affect about 20% of new mothers. Postpartum psychosis looks more like a typical psychotic episode, where a person can have hallucinations and delusions. It looks a lot like a bipolar mania, and in fact, there's a link between women who have bipolar and postpartum psychosis, that women with bipolar disorder are significantly more likely to develop postpartum psychosis. Another theory is that Lindsay Clancy actually has bipolar disorder, and she was not appropriately medicated at the time, and that her antidepressant medication triggered a manic episode. And this can happen with antidepressant medications triggering mania in people who actually have bipolar disorder. Mania can include symptoms like going for long periods without sleeping, having hallucinations such as hearing voices or seeing things that aren't there, severe mood fluctuations, including a suicidal depression, or delusional beliefs. The defense will argue that Lindsay Clancy had a profound decline in her mental health, that going from a devoted, loving mother to a suicidally depressed woman shows she was not in her right mind at the time of the killings, that she was not sane at the time. The prosecutors will argue that despite having mental health issues, she acted with intent and knew what she was doing, that she was sane at the time of the crimes. Generally, what happens in cases like Lindsay Clancy's is the defense has a forensic psychologist or forensic psychiatrist, or maybe multiple experts, to diagnose any condition and determine whether or not it was severe enough to meet the insanity defense. The prosecutor's office, then generally referred to as the state, will get a court-ordered evaluation with their own expert or multiple experts to determine if there's a mental health condition and whether or not the mental health condition is severe enough to qualify for the insanity defense. It will not surprise you to know that on many occasions the sides will disagree, and then the trial becomes essentially what we refer to as a battle of the experts. Obviously, without examining her, I cannot speak to Lindsay Clancy's diagnoses. Given the testimony of the people in her life, it does appear as though she had severe mental illness symptoms, which were becoming increasingly more severe leading up to the time she killed her children and then nearly killed herself. One of the testifying psychiatrists explained that Lindsay Clancy received treatment in the weeks prior to the killings, but the treating psychiatrist did not review her prior psychiatric records before they were treating her. So they might have missed information from the medical records that could have provided clarity about her diagnosis and the types of medications she actually needed. Another question I've been asked about Lindsay Clancy's case is, How can forensic psychologists or psychiatrists tell if she's faking symptoms of mental illness? We do this in various ways. One way we tell whether or not people are faking mental illness is we ask them about symptoms that actually don't exist, or symptoms that don't generally go together. And if someone is endorsing a bunch of fake symptoms, then they're not credible, and likely faking, which we refer to as malingering. Another way we assess whether or not someone is faking mental health symptoms is to rely on collateral sources, like medical records, or we interview people who are close to the defendant who have more inside information. In Lindsay Clancy's case, her husband and nanny reported increasing signs of depression, so their statements would be really informative. Ms. Clancy also kept a journal where she documented her struggle with mental illness, and that might also be used as a collateral source to verify that she had been increasingly becoming more and more symptomatic. There were also medical records showing her history of depression and various treatment. All these collateral pieces would be used to determine if she was feigning or not. So here's the thing. Many people say, well, just because somebody has a mental illness doesn't excuse their actions. Well, actually, by law, it kind of does. For a crime to have happened, you need two things. You need the act itself, and the second thing that's required is the mental state, the criminal mindset to commit that act. So, for example, if you're sitting on a bus and someone next to you has a seizure and they end up punching you in the throat, the act of hitting you has occurred, but the mental state that needs to be present for assault to have occurred wasn't present, so therefore they wouldn't be criminally liable for their actions. According to the law, the person needs to have both the criminal mentality when they commit a bad act and the act itself. If their bad behavior is explained by a mental illness, then the person is considered to not have been in their right mind at the time, to not have been able to form the intent, the required mental state to commit that crime. Essentially, the argument is that the criminal activity would not have happened had the person not been impaired by the symptoms of the mental illness. The prosecutor will try to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Lindsay Clancy was sane at the time, that she understood that what she was doing was wrong, and she knew it was criminally wrong. If the jury agrees that she was sane and knew that her behavior was wrong, then Lindsay Clancy will go to prison for life. If the jury believes she did not have the required mental state due to her mental illness, then she will be committed to a state hospital facility indefinitely. Regardless of what the jury concludes, this is a case that's beyond tragic, and everyone in that family will be affected and grieve for the rest of their lives. Although I did not evaluate Lindsay Clancy, I've evaluated several parents who have killed their children. One was a mother with a 7-year-old son who had a very severe physical and intellectual disabilities. She shot him in the head before trying to shoot herself. The gun she used was an old family antique, and it jammed when she tried to shoot herself. This was verified by the police lab. So when the gun would not fire, she took all the pills in the house, a near fatal dose of medications, opiates, antidepressants, aspirin, everything available. Her mother came home and found her covered in blood and unresponsive on the floor. She called emergency services, and then this mother was rushed to the hospital. This mother, who I will refer to by the fake name Maria, was charged with aggravated murder, which can carry the death penalty if the person's convicted. In the years prior to killing her son, Maria had been living with her own mother. She spent all of her time taking care of her son, who had very severe physical disabilities. He couldn't walk, he was nonverbal, he was vision and hearing impaired, he was incontinent, had regular seizures, he was fed with a feeding tube. He was hospitalized many times for seizures and surgeries to relieve the fluid that had been building up in his brain. In his 7 years of life, he had gone through 28 different surgeries, 19 of which were brain surgeries. One of his treating physicians, an epilepsy specialist, described this 7-year-old child as slightly better than minimally conscious. According to multiple family sources, Maria's adult life was devoted to caring for her son, and she described him as wonderful and loving, that she adored him even when he smeared feces on her face. As he got bigger, she was the one to move him from his wheelchair to his car seat to his bed and back. He required a feeding tube, and feeding took approximately an hour each time. He had to be watched constantly because of his chronic seizures. Because he was unable to communicate, he often became violent when he was upset, pulling his mother's hair, throwing things. Maria kept her hair short so he couldn't pull it. Maria had been involved in a church, but they were asked not to attend services anymore because her son was too loud in church. Maria was told they could no longer go to the library because her son was too disruptive. Some friends of the family told police that Maria had little to no help, that her own mother was really of no assistance. Her sister did not help. There were no other family members around. Maria had no respite from her responsibility. Even though she had been approved for respite services, there was no provider available with the training needed to care for her son's specific needs. Maria was afraid to put her son in any kind of daycare because there's a higher rate of abuse towards children who have special medical needs. Her son's father was not involved at all. During the brief relationship she had with him, he became abusive, and he told her to get an abortion when she got pregnant, which obviously she didn't do. He left and had no contact with her or their son. Maria's sister did not want to spend time with them because this 7-year-old boy had pinched her toddler, and she was concerned about her child's safety. Maria had no social life, no friends, because she spent all of her time caring for her son. She tried to get therapy to help manage her son's challenging behaviors. Because he often pinched and scratched and bit her, he threw his body around when she tried to move him from his wheelchair to the car or the bed. Because his medical condition was so severe, and his related behavior problems were also so severe, it was very hard for her to engage in the general community or even with other mothers who also had severely disabled children. The defense team interviewed many of these parents who have children with severe medical issues, and a fair number of them talked very frankly about how they have each considered ending their children's lives because they feel that ending the suffering would be merciful. Otherwise, it's drawn-out torture. Some of these parents ask, at what point am I contributing to my child's suffering? One mother we interviewed said, it's difficult for society to see this, but it's similar to the same conversation we have with elderly family members or a spouse with a fatal condition regarding the end-of-life discussion. So many of these mothers of special needs children talked about having severe depression at some point and considering suicide, but then they think, who will be there to care for my child? In the weeks prior to the homicide, Maria's sister basically told her she was a burden to their mother because she had no job or financial stability. Maria already struggled with depression, and she became increasingly feeling as though she was a burden. She and her son were a burden to the family. Her depression became worse. She talked about being on autopilot all week and hearing a voice that she believed was God telling her to just do it, to just end it over and over. It wouldn't stop. Maria had been hearing the voice of God since she was a child, which her mother and her aunt knew about, but they didn't think this behavior was out of the ordinary for someone who had such strong religious conviction. For most of her life, the voice of God had been a positive thing for Maria. It was encouraging. when her son was ill as an infant and doctors suggested removing him from life support at that time. Maria heard God tell her to keep going and to be positive. And she said that God felt like a loving, nice, peaceful grandfather. When Maria was arrested for killing her son, she was surprised by her legal charges because she said, "I didn't kill my son." She believed she sent him to heaven, and she planned to join him. For my client, both the defense and state psychologists gave the opinion that Maria was suffering from a mental illness at the time, and she qualified for the insanity defense. She was sentenced to 20 years at the state hospital, where she remains to this day. If you like these stories and you want me to keep uploading these videos, please hit like or subscribe. I have full videos on YouTube and training videos on Substack. Thanks for watching.